Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel, Diana and the Book Hunt. I feel like it's been forever since I've actually filmed anything, which is also kind of true because it's been maybe about 2 weeks since I've filmed. And this has a reason. I was just really busy. I really haven't been at home having any kind of opportunity to stand still and film and talk about books. But yeah, now that I've wrapped up a lot of things that I needed to wrap up, I can finally pick up where I left off and film a couple of videos that I can post in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to start off with a trope recommendation video that I've wanted to do for a while. It's a trope recommendation video for a trope that I really like. It's small town romances, and I really have tried to select books for this one that haven't been talked about too much, or at least I haven't talked about these books a lot on my channel, so I really want to give you some fresh books to consider. A couple of them you might have heard on BookTube going around in the past couple of months because they're obviously very popular books, but a couple of them I think are kind of hidden gems that you can check out. So yeah, I really can't wait to share these books with you so you can check out whether you want to add some of them to your TBR. So I don't really know how many I have for you here. It's at least like 7 or 8. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive in and let you know which books I've selected for this trope recommendation video. Maybe just let me start off by saying why I really like small town romances. I think that the way that small towns are really portrayed within books in a very charming, cozy way is something that makes me feel a lot of comfort. So I really like the setting of those books, and the fact that within small towns you typically have a very tight-knit community, a community that often kind of offers a found family aspect for the specific hero or heroine that we're dealing with. And also a little bit the kind of situation that you get where, because everyone is knowing of one another, you kind of have the small town drama that happens within books with a small town setting. Some people may find that annoying. I actually love it. And yeah, so within a book, when we have someone who is very nosy or someone who really is up in the business of the hero or heroine, that kind of makes it for an alleviating kind of an element within the book for me, so I really like that. So yeah, all of the books that I'm going to mention have this kind of a setting, so I've really enjoyed them. Most of them have been 4.5 or 5-star reads for me, so yeah, I really can't wait to share them with you. I'm going to start off with one that is really popular. It's a Catherine Cowles book. It's actually the only Catherine Cowles book that I've read as of now. I do have a couple of her books from her backlist in Storytel, so I'm going to pick those up whenever the mood strikes. But the one that I'm going to talk about I read last year. It's called Tattered Stars, and it's part of her Tattered and Torn series. It's the first book. And this one is actually really like interesting because it's not only a small town setting, but also kind of a romantic suspense book. We have our heroine Everly. The book starts with her being 11 years old, if I'm not mistaken, so she's really in her young teenage years. She is, at the start of the book, going to the police station to turn her father in because he has kidnapped one of the young kids in their small town, a young girl. And she turns him in, meaning that she is betraying her family, because he gets arrested and he gets convicted for this kidnapping. It turns out that her family is part of this kind of a prepper, kind of survivalist community within this small town that they live in. And because she turns him in, basically her family turns against her and she needs to move away. She moves away to her sister somewhere further away from this small town. And many years later, when her mother comes to pass, she inherits the land and the house that she used to live in the small town, and she decides to go back and kind of make this animal sanctuary, so create this animal sanctuary on this land. But unfortunately, she has a difficult time doing that because she gets a lot of setback from her family, who is still very mad at her for her betrayal. And her romance within this book is with Hayes, who is actually the brother of this girl who was kidnapped. And he's also like the police chief or sheriff. I don't know what his function is, but he's in the police force of this small town. And at the start of the book, he's kind of against her moving back because she's kind of bringing back all this baggage and these negative emotions for his family. But as he kind of gets to know her, he slowly but surely is very much influenced to believe otherwise about her, to really see her for her true self. And he really helps her out in a lot of instances. And their relationship kind of evolves into more like a friendship and then into lovers territory eventually. So yeah, this is a very epic kind of a romantic suspense small town romance that I really enjoyed. I gave it 4.5 stars, and if you haven't picked up any Catherine Cowles books, this is a really good start because I hadn't read any of my own and I really enjoyed this one. So the next book actually has a similar title to the first book I mentioned. It's called Tattered by Devney. It's part of her Lark Cove series, and actually it's my favorite out of that series. I really like this one. I have to say that Devney has a lot of books that have a small town setting. Most of them are set, I think, in Montana. And this one is one that has an element that some people may steer away from when they hear about it, but I'm just going to explain why you should give it a chance. In this book, we have Thea and Logan who meet up and have this one night stand situation, kind of a one-time only hookup. They don't know each other and of each other, and they actually know only their first names. So when Thea later on finds out that she's pregnant, she has no way of kind of communicating with him that he's going to be a dad. So it's kind of considered a secret baby, but I don't think that it's the conventional secret baby trope, because basically she does want to tell him that he's going to be a dad, but she can't get in touch with him. So within this book, we have Thea who raises a baby girl on her own. A couple of years on, I think 5 or 6 years after she's given birth, Logan actually visits her small town because he has a business opportunity there. Turns out that Logan is really rich. He wants to invest in kind of this property where there is this summer camp. And yeah, he finds out that Thea lives there, and he finds out that he's a dad. So there's a lot going on within this story. And I really love Thea. I really loved her daughter, Charlie. I really loved the summer camp setting. I really loved how Logan kind of almost dropped everything that he was doing to focus on what is happening now in his life, that he is introduced to this child who he hasn't known about. So yeah, I really love this story. The small town setting is definitely present here, and if you haven't read anything by Devney, or you have and you really love her settings, try this one out as well. So there's this small town series that I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So I thought that I'd mention it just in case you haven't encountered it before. The books are by Reid, and it's the Winston Brothers series. I think that the full-length novels are 7, and then there's a couple of novellas thrown in there, so maybe 10 in total. And each of the books follows different siblings out of this family. They're a very tight-knit family that just warms my heart. And there's just so many different kinds of male main characters. Like, we have a grump, we have a prankster, we have a bit of an oddball, we have the very responsible big brother, we have the baby brother who kind of has these expectations thrown on him that he needs to make it because it seems like he's going to be the one who has the most opportunity to make something of himself. So there's just so many different kind of aspects within each of their books, their individual books. And when it comes to tropes with their romantic partners, there's second chance in one of them, there's grumpy sunshine, there's friends to lovers, childhood friends to lovers. There's just so many tropes that you can focus on. And I really love also the charming setting within the mountain town that Reid has created. It's actually such an amazing setting that she has let other people, like other authors, write within that setting as well. I just think it's so enchanting and so magical that she has created this tight-knit community within this small town that everyone loves. And also, all of the Winston brothers are just amazing. Their relationships are really so heartfelt, and so funny at times. There's just so much going on that you really want to know all of their stories, and I've enjoyed every single one of them. I do have to say that Billy, the eldest brother, his story was my favorite. Actually, his love story is split up into two books, books 6 and 7, so those are the ones that I absolutely loved and gave 5 stars to. But I think if you start from the start, you have an absolute blast reading through all of them, because each and every one has a very special story. So yeah, definitely give them a try. I need to mention a Brittainy C. Cherry story within this recommendation video because a lot of her books actually are centering around a small town community. But the one that I'm going to mention is one that I have read a couple of months ago. I think it was like September or October of 2022, and I really liked it. It's Southern Storms, and this book centers on two characters who are going through a trauma, each of them respectively, and they've known each other as children. Their names are Jax and Kandi, and they knew each other as children, but obviously life took them into different directions. And then Kennedy is now going to be divorced from her husband after a very unpleasant split up that she had and the trauma that she went through. So she moves with her sister in this small town, and she lives next to Jax, who has this property with a very big land that covers it. And she goes on a walk one day and she encounters this amazing field of daisies and a little bench. And she wants to go ahead and enjoy this setting that she has encountered, but only finds out that Jax is there and that he is very unpleasantly surprised by her company. So we have a very grumpy hero, and actually within Brittainy Cherry's books we often have a grumpy hero, and typically we have a heroine who is kind of a sunshiny character, or at least the kind of character who alleviates the grumpiness of the hero. But within this story we actually have someone who gives pushback, and I really love that. So Kennedy was an amazing heroine. Even though she was going through a lot of trauma, she did not let him walk over her or somehow kind of push her away with his grumpiness. They really kind of connected over the fact that both of them had a lot going on. So yeah, it's really not a surprise that a Brittainy C. Cherry book is going to make it on this list, because she has an amazing way of creating such a beautiful setting, as well as really have us as readers focus on the emotional journey that her characters go through. So yeah, this one is definitely one that you should check out. I promised you I'm going to talk about books that are not talked about too much on BookTube. At least I think they're not. One of the most popular small town romances on BookTube is Archer's Voice, but not many people talk about the follow-up book, which focuses on Travis, who is actually the bad guy within book 1, within Archer's Voice. Travis has his standalone book called Travis, and I think a lot of people maybe don't want Travis to have his happily ever after what he did in Archer's Voice, but I was really intrigued to see how his story will evolve and whether he will kind of redeem himself within his own book. And I loved how Mia Sheridan approaches his story, because obviously he was such an anti-hero within the first book, and we really have kind of condemned him because of his actions within book 1. And she took such an amazing approach of really having the story begin a couple of years later, where he already has worked through what has happened and really worked on his relationship with Archer and his family, and really kind of settled into a new role, kind of a more positive role within the small town of Pillion where they live. And his story is very interesting because his love story focuses on himself and Haven. Haven is a newcomer within this small town. She comes from a different place together with her brother. And the interesting part of how the story starts is Travis has this girlfriend for maybe a year now, and he's kind of thinking about taking things to the next level with her. But then he finds her in bed with Haven's brother. So it's really an awkward situation to start off with, and then he finds Haven stealing these plants from a specific place, and it's a bit of an awkward start of their relationship, but they built a very beautiful friendship because of certain situations that happened with Travis's home. He needs to move away for a little bit. She moves into this kind of a old town hotel where he also ends up, and they have a forced proximity kind of situation going on as well. So yeah, I found that Travis really redeemed himself within this book, and if you haven't read this book, I definitely urge you to try it out, because I think everyone deserves a second chance, right? If you make a big mistake, we should allow the person to kind of, yeah, really work through what has happened and try to make up for it. So I think that he did. Just read it and let me know whether you think the same. The next one I'm going to mention is one that I really haven't heard anyone talk about, to be honest. And I did read it quite a while back, maybe 3 years ago, and the book is called Chasing the Moon by S.M. Soto. This book kind of starts off a bit rocky, in my opinion at least. It does get you captivated immediately because of how the relationship between the hero and heroine is presented from the start. They are teenagers, and they know each other already from young age on, and the heroine is immediately infatuated with the hero. I'm not going to mention their names because they're Greek and I'm going to butcher them. And basically we have the heroine who is immediately captivated by the hero. He kind of is not really on the same level as her when it comes to his feelings for her, and I think he's a bit older than her as well, and that makes for the difference. And they actually have a one-night stand that kind of influences them in very different ways within their path, within their story. They have a longer period of time where they're separated, and then eventually I think the heroine comes back to the small town where he is still living, and then they reconnect with a lot of things that happen and go on. So within this story, there is a trope that is not very welcomed by some, so I'm going to mention it. If you don't want to be spoiled, just move on ahead if you want to pick this book up. But if you want to know, there is a secret baby that is in this story. But yeah, I found that the whole situation with her being infatuated with him at the start of the book, and then her coming back and having the roles reversed, I found that really appropriate within the story. So yeah, I really had a couple of moments that I really caught feels. Like I was kind of sniffling when I was reading, like halfway through or 70% throughout the book. I was kind of blinking back tears, so I definitely wanted to mention this book because it made me feel emotional, and you may like it as well. The next book I'm going to talk about is by Kandi Steiner. It's a book that I really haven't mentioned on my channel, I believe, because I read it a while back, but I definitely want to mention it here. It is set in a small town, but I think that the most kind of important topic within this book is the topic of women with kind of unhealthy self-image issues. The book is called Weightless, and I found that it's very relatable for us women to really easily be influenced by someone from outside who views us in a certain way, that we kind of pick up on their way of seeing ourselves, which is very toxic. And unfortunately, the heroine here, Natalie, she went through a very nasty breakup with her ex, and he really talked her into believing that she has these issues, and she creates these insecurities about her body that are very unhealthy. So she decides to join this gym to kind of have a more positive outcome for herself, and this is where she meets the love interest Rhodes, who is kind of a grumpy hero, but when it comes to the heroine, he is an absolute sweetheart. He is the person who kind of makes her believe that those insecurities are not what makes her who she is. He really sees through them through the insecurities, and he really makes her understand that every single one of her insecurities can be what someone perceives as something that is beautiful. So if, for example, you have big hips and you're like, oh, I have these huge hips and I don't like them, and you feel insecure about them, like your dream man, if he looks at those hips, he can be like, oh, I love those hips. And you really start to believe that, wow, the self-image that I have, the opinion that I have about my hips may not be as objective or as true as I may think that they are. And I really loved this about the hero, because he really made her break down those insecurities and make them into something more realistic. So yeah, I really love this book. Besides the small town setting, we have these topics that are handled within the book, and I really love this, and I encourage you to pick it up as well. Next up, I have a book by K.K. Allen. I've read a couple of K.K. Allen books, and most of them I've really enjoyed, and this one is actually at the top of the list. The book is called The Bridge Between Us, and it deals with two people who have known each other their whole lives, and their families have always been rivals. They live in this small town that is like a part like of a winery, and their families have been rivals because of this land that they're situated on. And these two people, the boy is called Reid and the girl is called Camilla, they've always been friends in secret, and they've always met on this bridge that is kind of dividing the two properties. And I found the setting to be so magical. The fact that there's wineries, these grapevines that are going like for miles and miles, and the fact that they have these amazing traditions around the wine, what is it, the wine season or the grape season that they make the wine. There's just so many beautiful like very scenic kind of scenes within this story that I loved. And the fact that we have kind of a forbidden romance, because these two rival families, they don't see eye to eye, so it's assumed that these two people shouldn't be together, and it's kind of them working against their whole world to try to get together in the end. So yeah, there's a lot of goodness going on within this book, and additionally there is a romantic suspense situation going on that makes the book even more exciting and kind of angsty. So yeah, I really like this one. I gave it 4.5 stars and I recommend it. If you know me, you know that I absolutely love Emma Scott, and I definitely love recommending her books on my channel. The book that I'm going to recommend for the small town setting is part of her Lost Boys series. It's called The Girl and the Love Song. This book is one that is typical for Emma Scott, very emotional. We deal with Miller, who is really not well off, and Violet, who actually is well off. They meet up as teenagers and they forge a very strong friendship with each other. She really helps him out with the very difficult situation that he's going through with his family and his financial situation, as well as his health issues. He has a chronic illness that is very dangerous for him. And additionally, he really has this passion for music. He has a talent for music, and he really wants to make it to kind of get his family out of this horrible setting that they've kind of grown into. And obviously they come from very different backgrounds, and her life is very different than his, and it's kind of a situation where you almost feel like society and the community around them wouldn't want them to be together, but then things happen. So yeah, I absolutely love this story. I love that it was angsty, but I also love the friends to lovers aspect within the book. I absolutely love this trope because we really get to know the people before they become lovers. They forge a connection that is so special, that lives outside of the romantic attraction that they may have for each other. So really, I really love this trope, and within this book I found that it was done very well because we see the progression of their relationship. And first of all, it doesn't really focus on the romance, but really on their life circumstances. So yeah, I definitely recommend this one. I've actually read the second book within this series as well, and it was even more hard-hitting and more emotional than the first one. But yeah, I would definitely recommend that you start with this one and then maybe check out the second one as well. These were all the small town recommendations that I wanted to give you today. I hope you found some that you haven't heard of before, or some that were sitting in your TBR that you're now motivated to pick up. And yeah, if you've read any of these books, please let me know what you thought about them, whether you enjoyed them as much as I did. I hope to see you very soon in the next one. Have a wonderful, marvelous day. Happy reading. Take care, and bye-bye. See you soon.